All right, there is another election. This is the third one of this year for the Bay of Quinte. Today in studio, we have Kate Crothers, the NDP candidate for the Bay of Quinte. I'm Ryan Snyder, and this is the Take a Look podcast.
Hey, Ryan.
Well, Kate, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is fun.
Excellent. Well, first, let's ideally, like, the point of this podcast for these political series isn't to focus so much on all of the policy, even though that's a big part of it, but really we want to get to know who you are and why really people should vote for you and why you'd be a great fit to represent us in Ottawa.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually thinking about this over my morning coffee. And so first of all, I'm a small business owner in the region. I own an interior and garden design studio in Picton. I have clients all over the region, and we also work on projects, in Toronto and up north and as far as British Columbia. So I am familiar with this community. I grew up in Campbellford. My first job was at the Quinte Mall. I went to Loyalist College, and when I decided I wanted to really lay down roots to raise my 4 kids, I knew that Picton was the right place for me because it's such a beautiful area. The community really takes care of each other, and I feel really well supported there and really proud to live in this region. So I guess the question is, and we kind of touched on this before we sat down, is when you're voting, I think so many people vote for the party that their parents voted for and their grandparents. And, they don't even ask questions. It's just, my papa voted Conservative, so I do too. And I think people don't really understand that we are here. The government is here to work for the people. And they truly have agency in who they get to represent them and the kind of things that they want brought to the federal government. They get to have those conversations with their candidates, and they get to vote for the best person that's really going to work for them and their interests at Parliament Hill. And I have spent a lifetime doing the hard thing. I have never chosen the easy route. I have done the impossible over and over again. I will not accept no for an answer. And I think that's what you want in a candidate, someone who is willing to push and push and push for your best interest.
Right. I mean, we do live in a representative democracy after all. So having the community's needs and voices heard in Ottawa is kind of the whole point. And often that's not exactly the way it happens with every party or every member of parliament, unfortunately. But well, I want to get a bit into your background a little bit. So running business, obviously, like you say, you chose the hard thing. Running a business is not for the faint of heart. And you have 4 kids. Parenthood is also not for the faint of heart. Can you take me through a bit of that background from running the business, having kids, to now where you want to put your name in the hat and be our representative in Ottawa?
Okay, that's how much time do you have? So my plan wasn't to be an entrepreneur when I was in post-secondary. I wanted to be a school teacher. And then I did the paramedic program thinking that would be my thing. And then I had my first child, and I wanted a life where I could parent and work. And I needed the flexibility of being an entrepreneur. So I sort of went down that route. Yeah. And I've been working for myself ever since.
And you can't go back to working for someone after that.
You really can't. I mean, I did do some time in the film industry, which is, you're not self-employed, but you do get to pick and choose your projects. So there is some nice flexibility there, but truly once you're an entrepreneur, you're always going to be an entrepreneur. So yeah, I have been running my business since the birth of my first child, and it's just sort of grown and grown over the years. And I now support my kids on my own with the income I earn in my business. It's grown to a place where I can take care of my family, where I can employ people in the community and work with other community partners and make sure everybody is doing well. So yeah, I'm really proud of the thing that I've built.
How has running a business shaped kind of your political views as far as, choosing to go with the NDP party, the New Democratic Party? What experiences did you take from running a business that would be applied under, I guess, your political philosophy?
Well, when you run a business, you have to be aware of what's happening worldwide because your bottom line is impacted by it. So it really has been the past, since our friend Mr. Trump took office.
There's controversy down south? What are you talking about?
So weird, right? So, we're all feeling it. All of us business owners. People are afraid to spend their money, and rightly so. Nobody knows what's happening. Nobody can believe a word the guy says. Like, he says one thing and then he walks it back and then he says another, and it really is, he's a bully. And it's like, rather than, you don't engage with bullies, you pull back and you focus on the things that matter. So as a business owner, it really is a conversation of, finding creative solutions to keep our businesses running and figuring out how to work together and build new and different things that can support us and our families. And I think bringing that to government is a valuable skill. This status quo doesn't work right now. And it seems like it's only going to continue to get worse, depending on what happens in the States. I mean, he's in office for 4 years. So we really need to, A, take care of our people, and B, come up with new and creative solutions to make sure that everybody's getting paid.
What was the tipping point, I guess, for you to say, I want to put my name in the hat here. I'm going to jump into the Shark Tank and deal with all of these issues, whether it's the tariff war that's happening, the housing crisis that we're in. I mean, you name it. We have a list of lots of needs in our community just here. What was it that brought you to say, I'm going to put my name in?
Yeah, well, these are conversations that we've been having for a while now. And my studio door is sort of a revolving door, and people come in through the community all the time and talk about it. And I have a fairly big Instagram presence, and we have those conversations online. And I feel like people come to me looking for solutions. So rather than just sitting back and being passive in those conversations, I decided I would do something about it. I'm also looking at my kids' future. I am looking at what's happening in the school. There are, conversations about Trump happening at my kids' school within their peer group. They have this idea that Trump is a cool guy because of his TikTok. And I always take a moment to educate kids whenever I can. And it's kind of like, this is our future we're talking about. This is a big deal. This is the most important election of our lifetime, I would say. And it is going to shape the world that our kids live in. And that's not something I'm willing to sit back and watch happen. I felt compelled to get engaged and do this.
Yeah, I want to get into the kind of the Trump tariff situation in a little bit, because you're right. It's like, I think this election probably the most consequential election of our lifetime, or at least in recent memory, because mainly of this trade war. I mean, that you've mentioned Trump's rhetoric that is concerning, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, this 51st state stuff to every patriotic Canadian, it's just like a jab to the soul a little bit.
Right.
And it's not a simple fix, but definitely having a leader with a proper mandate is the first step. So I agree. I think this election is super important. Being basically kind of a natural community leader with people coming to you, running business. when you decided to get involved in politics, what drove you to pick the NDP as the party to align yourself with?
That's a good question. I mean, when people hear small business owner, they automatically think conservative. But our society doesn't work if our vulnerable populations aren't being taken care of. Our society doesn't work if people can't afford a house. The NDP values, I believe, are truly Canadian. They are what makes Canada, Canada. They are the ones that pushed through dental care in the last Liberal term. They're pushing through pharmacare, affordable daycare. They truly are focused on taking care of their workers, and everybody benefits from that. I mean, I'm self-employed. I don't have health insurance. I have to pay out of pocket to take my kids to the dentist or for medicine. So those are things that are benefiting everybody, not just vulnerable populations. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the NDP values are really what lies closest to my heart. And I think, if Canadians really sit down and ask themselves what makes Canada, Canada, they're always coming back to universal health care and a living wage. And these are true NDP values.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are there any, you've mentioned pharmacare, dental care that was pushed through in the last parliament. Is there any pieces of policy in the platform that really resonate with you that are like, this is the thing that, this is why I'm on board with NDP and this is why we need to be the leadership? It's
funny every time. So throughout the few weeks, they've been sort of putting out their policy pieces like one day at a time. We get an email from the NDP party with the talking points, and every day I'm like, yes, this is what we need. So no, there's not just one thing. It's just broad spectrum. It is so clear that the NDP party is dedicated to taking care of Canadians. And that feels like a priority. We're watching the class divide get greater and greater. Middle class, I don't even know where that lands anymore. Yeah. I think, we used to call ourselves middle class if we were making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. And now, those same people are 2 paychecks away from losing their home or not buying groceries. And billionaires keep getting richer. And I mean, we look at Mark Carney, he spent his entire career making billionaires richer. And that's not a Canadian value. That's not what we need right now. We need a party that's committed to taking care of the average person.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with the class issue, because I think the middle class is really the foundation of what truly Canada is. And the thing that the biggest marker of the middle class is home ownership, mainly because you can then leverage that asset to invest into a business, which creates jobs, which boosts the economy, or into another investment property, or to build some new buildings. But when that's unattainable, you have far less momentum for the middle class, and it is shrinking. And I think that's for me, that is the biggest issue, is affordable, well, not even affordable, because that word has been tainted, but attainable housing, where people can not go house broke to live in something that's conducive to human life, right? Because I think even when you're breaking the bank to live in a little tiny shoebox that just kind of kills your soul, I don't think that is the answer. We got to figure out how to solve that. But so for locally here in the Bay of Quinte, we're part of that housing crisis. What's your take on that? How do you think that we even got here to this place where we just don't have attainable housing?
For home buyers? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the whole COVID boom really affected our housing market. This area is a destination. It's got some pretty incredible natural resources, and everybody wants a piece of that. And, we're seeing gentrification, which it helps and it hurts. I mean, it's great for the economy, not great for people who have lived here their entire lives. And
it's that middle class part again, right? Because it's that gentrification. It's like, great, yes, more money, more investment. But then if we don't have that middle
Yeah.
class, is the structure kind of breaks down.
Exactly. Yeah. Like the people that have like grown up here and want to buy a home around the corner for their parents so they can be engaged grandparents. And that's just, they're being priced out of the market. And growing up small town, I know that story. And, you know, it always seemed like you would buy a house. That would be the next step after you sort of got married and, or got a career. And now that's just not happening for people. So, you know, I think talking about first-time home buyers is really important here. The NDP is committing to offering mortgages that are affordable to first-time home buyers to give them the opportunity to get into the housing market. So that's a piece of policy that is really exciting.
What are they doing there? Are they?
So they want to offer mortgages that are as have some national interest, so that they can control the mortgage rate to make it accessible.
Okay. So is this basically like a different type of mortgage?
It would be.
Is it through the banks, or is the government giving out the mortgages directly?
Dual sort of partnership. Okay. Yeah. So
that's an interesting strategy.
Yeah. So the idea being that if you're a first time home buyer, you can get a mortgage you can afford, which is would be super helpful. I mean, so we have COVID where all the prices went up, and then all of a sudden the mortgage rates exploded. Some people went from paying $2,000 a month to $6,000 a month. That's a crazy jump in your monthly expenses, especially if your income is fairly fixed. So
we're seeing that fallout even like for us at One Look. Like we're primarily in real estate, and we're seeing a lot of these house sales where the prices are still high because they bought in on that high market with those 2.4% interest rates, which were great for the time. But when you buy high with a low interest rate, really the interest rate's got nowhere to go but up. And
that happened fast too, right? Like it was like overnight all of a sudden.
Yeah.
I know like some design projects I was working on, they bought high and then they renovated and invested a ton of money in the house, and it'll be 20 years before they can recoup that investment. So really tough time.
And then it just has that trickle effect in it as far as the real estate market goes, because then you're upside down in your mortgage, so you got to sell it for this price, but it's actually not what the market is ready for. So then that becomes a comparable that's everything else is still kind of artificially elevated still.
Exactly. And for most people, this is their biggest asset. So it has pretty grave impact. And I was also thinking about it this morning from the other end. It's in terms of affordable housing, those retirees that their entire sort of retirement plan was to build equity, sell their house for probably 4 or 5 times more than what they paid for it, and live off that money. But all of a sudden they can't buy back into the market because affordable housing isn't there for them. Even their rent is going to be more than the mortgage that they were paying on the house, but they need that money out of the house to survive on. So yeah, it's a tricky balancing act, and definitely a major concern.
So the NDP, they're coming up with like first-time homebuyer special mortgages. Obviously, not everybody can get into that first-time homebuyer situation. There's also the rental market is still super inflated because of the fallout of COVID. A lot of people like to point at the STAs, especially in Prince Edward County, that have caused a supply-demand problem. What other solutions do you see locally here that we can alleviate or hopefully solve this housing crisis?
We need to build more affordable housing, more rent-controlled units. The Picton Town Council has come up with a creative solution. They bought an old school in town, and they are working with a developer, but it's more of a partnership. So they get to maintain rent-controlled units for people who need it. There will be units at market value that can support these subsidies. So it really is sort of a nice balance, and they've gotten creative to do it. And I think that's what we need to see happen all across the region, is just building more affordable housing for people to have opportunity to have a roof over their heads.
And you're talking about the Queen Elizabeth development, of course. And
Yes.
I saw your post that you were advocating for it as well with Town Council, which congratulations, by the way, to all of us, really, because this is a project that really needed to be put through. But there was a lot of opposition too, right?
Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of opposition in numbers, but they had a big voice and they slowed down the project. And I actually live in that neighborhood. I can see that development from my kitchen window, and the people that were opposed are my neighbors. And, you know, I get it. Like, it is, change can be scary. And we're talking about building, you know, hundreds of units. We think about the construction that's going to go on, the vehicles down our street. And, you know, it is a really beautiful neighborhood full of old houses, and the idea of introducing something new is scary. But I think the benefits outweigh their concerns all day long, even for them. An income diverse neighborhood has so much more to offer than a street full of most of the houses are owned by a couple whose kids have grown and gone, and there's not a lot of action, and there's not a lot of life. So I think this will bring a really beautiful thing into the neighborhood. I'm excited for my kids to have friends around the corner to play with. I'm seeing like lemonade stands and street hockey games and yard sales, and green spaces is part of the development. So having that in the community will be incredible. And just, I think, you know, a community is so important, and this is going to add such a beautiful dynamic to what's there already, which is already incredible. I mean, my neighbors, they have taken care of me. I have this screen door on the front of my house that it keeps warping and the hinges fall off, and I go away and I come back and my neighbor has taken off my door and repaired it and painted it and rehung it, just because he's being neighborly. He's not asking for money. And, you know, I've had meals dropped off at my house, and my driveway, you know, cleared out in the winter. And
small town community is so nice.
Man,
I love Picton.
It truly is like a really incredible place to live. I feel very lucky.
But with small communities, there's also some negative side too, where you have, like, for the opposition for the school development, it's kind of the NIMBY people, the not in my backyard people. Where did you find that main opposition was from? Like, what was the reasoning behind, no, we don't want more density in our community?
So there was some concerning sort of presentations at the council meeting where one resident posted a photo of an apartment complex in the GTA and cited how many times the police had been called to that area. I think there's some classism at work. I think they're worried about the real estate values of their homes. And I have to say I think it's just lack of an open mind, and maybe there's an education piece that needs to happen, because if you go down that rabbit hole, I am sure the internet has a lot to offer in terms of why affordable housing isn't a good idea. But what we've seen proven time and time and time again is that a diverse community with diverse income is always a bonus for everybody. So hopefully they can, you know, open their hearts a little bit and get on board with the project.
I've definitely heard that critique before, especially on the investment side. I have some family members who are pretty staunch in their philosophy that way, where it's like, this is my investment. You're going to affect my investment if you bring in higher density, or even if you allow fourplexes, which is what the provincial NDP and Greens were putting forth for policy, which the Ford government, I don't believe, has changed that yet. But the argument is, you're going to affect my investment. This is, you know, I've bought this, I put money into it, and now it's this type of community. Now it's changing. What do you say to those people who have that concern of their property value shifting because of more density in their community?
Well, I mean, that's it's hard to predict what's going to happen with your real estate. I don't have the facts in front of me, but from what I understand, it only increases your real estate value with more people in the community. It's becoming a more desired area. More people want to be. It's rare that your investment is going to dip. And I guess the real question is, are you going to deprive a family of a roof over their head because you're worried about losing a few $1,000s? Like that is, the real question to ask yourself when you're opposing affordable housing. At this council meeting, a lot of people spoke who do require affordable housing. And they are brilliant members of our community, especially our arts community in Picton. It's the whole starving artist trope is there for a reason. It's not often a well-paid job, but it adds so much dimension to the fabric of a community, and it makes it a more desirable place to live. And, the service workers need a place to live. Our industry is very much built on tourism, and people can't grow their business without people to fill the positions they need. It is a massive struggle for county business owners, and Belleville too, I would assume. So it's kind of like, you can put your head in the sand and believe that your house is the most important thing in the world and your bottom line is the only thing that matters. Or you can look around you and look at your community and look at the incredible people doing incredible things and think about how they too have a right to live a nice life in town. And they too have a right to house their children and feed their kids. And without them, you don't get the community that you live in.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then as we kind of mentioned before, home ownership is kind of the bedrock of our economy in a lot of ways, because we can then grow and invest in ourselves. And by not having enough housing for people, that just, again, eliminates the separation of the classes becomes the biggest issue again. And then we're shooting ourselves in the foot for that kind of economic growth and development of culture as well, like you say, in the arts, because it's hard to be an artist if you can't live anywhere.
Exactly.
And it just propagates from there. I wanted to ask you about kind of the effectiveness of federal policy for housing, because with the Queen Elizabeth development, obviously that was a municipal owned property. Mm-hmm. There's provincial infrastructure that comes in and financing that way. And even for a lot of other development, I guess the jurisdiction is typically under the province for infrastructure, and the municipalities for permitting and things like that. What role does the federal government play in the increasing of housing, and how would an NDP government implement their jurisdiction for the increase of housing?
So federal government holds the pocketbook on these things. And there could have been federal funding for that Queenie project, but it just didn't get secured. It is my impression that you have to fight like hell to get money for your community as an MP. So the NDP, I think all of the parties are interested in affordable housing. This is a conversation that everybody's having right now. The NDP is dedicated to building 100,000 rent-controlled units over the next 5 years on Crown land. And if elected, it would be up to me to bring that money back to the community. So it's there. You just have to fight for it.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I really learned from my interview actually with your counterpart, Amanda Robertson, on the provincial side, she's wonderful. Yeah. She kind of really opened my eyes to the fact that the multi-level government collaboration is super important to get anything done.
It is.
Because I asked her about the Conservatives have been talking for a few years now about a dollar for doors incentive, a carrot and stick approach to funding for municipalities, which on paper may sound great. It's like, oh yeah, this is a way to get housing done. But if we don't have the province involved to actually invest in the infrastructure, and we don't, then we're kind of stuck. And for example, like in the county, we're under, as I believe it's a 2-year development freeze surrounding our main town areas. That approach doesn't work for us if the municipality says we're not developing. So are we then at risk of losing those potential funds with a conservative government?
I mean, I think the concern there is the infrastructure of the community. So, but again, that sort of plays into that conversation of multi-level governments coming together and making stuff happen. So the focus might be on improving infrastructure so that it can support more homes. Like you can't, build a house without proper water or sewage. That's just not going to work. So yeah, again, it's a conversation of working together and really advocating for the community as a constituent and really making that all happen. And, infrastructure is a huge conversation in so many ways right now. We're all seeing the deficits. Like, can we talk about Highway 49 for a second? Like pothole central, what is one of the top 10 worst highways in Canada?
Someone thought it was a good idea to build a concrete highway in Canada.
Yeah, it was tough.
That's not gonna bulge or shift or anything.
Oh man, so my kid's dad lives in Kingston, so
so you're taking 49 all the time.
All the time, man. Like I have a personal interest in seeing that highway improved. I've talked to the mayor about it. I'm like, listen, I'll get you the money. You got to get it done.
Yeah.
Big deal. Let's make it happen. So, it's, and then if we invest in infrastructure, we're creating jobs, which is a huge need right now, especially as we're seeing tariffs come into play. And I know we're going to talk about this in a bit, but Belleville is going to be one of the hardest hit cities because of its manufacturing when all the tariffs drop, and people are going to be out of work. So if we're investing in infrastructure and housing, there's going to be a ton of jobs created for these people.
Well, let's jump into the tariff war that we're in now, because this is, I think, we're seeing it on the real estate side where we're actually listing heavy right now. There's a lot of listings out there, but buyers are less certain about making a big financial move because maybe they have investments in American companies, or they're even invested directly into the US dollar. They may own property down there, or they just are here and we're unsure of what our economy is going to look like when more of these tariffs come out, which again, like you say, it's hard to know what Trump is thinking, or because he's, so hyperbolic, but also moves the goalpost regularly. What is the NDP's plan in this tariff war? What's the strategy here? How do we say that we have an NDP government? What's the strategy to deal with Trump at the table? How are we approaching this?
I don't know if you can deal with Trump. Like, is anybody able to keep that man? This stuff I hear that man say on national television just blows my mind. Like the other day he was talking about clean energy, and we don't want those wind turbines because they're ugly, and we can't put them in the ocean because the whales. Like, what, man? Like, you're the president? So I think, rather than focusing on how are we going to work with Trump, we have to talk about how are we creating an economy that thrives without being totally dependent on the United States. So again, that conversation of infrastructure and investing in Canada and creating opportunities interprovincially and creating more trade routes, with the rest of the world. Like, we're not the only ones being hit by the United States. He's putting tariffs on everybody. So we were kind of alone in it, and nobody wanted to touch it because nobody wanted to poke the bear. But now that other countries are being affected by Trump and his tariffs and his nationalist plan for their economy, I think we're going to see other companies, or not not companies, countries who are going to be way more interested in working with Canada and, supporting. We're all going to work together and support each other and sort of leave the States out of the conversation.
Do you have hope for that, like, working out? Because, I mean, the U.S. has been our number one trade partner forever.
Yeah.
We have the longest unguarded border in the world. We often share family. We're very much like the little brother in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Do you genuinely have like hope where it's like, okay, if this avenue is no longer viable, maybe even just for 4 years, maybe even just 2, until the midterms. I don't know, like, where is there hope there? Does it practically work to kind of share our trade and investment around the world, or is this like is this going to be kind of a we're kind of
hold tight,
buckling down, and
I think both of those things are true. I mean, our trade to the U.S. is huge, and it's not like we can pivot and start shipping stuff to Europe without there being layers of added cost. So, it's not going to go away. I think we're still going to try to engage with the U.S. I know. I mean, on the bright side, not for us, but for them, our dollar is really low right now. So the film industry is doing a lot of filming in Canada because it's so affordable. I don't think those partnerships are going to go away, and they are going to cost some industries more than they have historically. But, we just need to push to make things that we know are going to work for sure and hope for the best when it comes to the States, because nobody can predict what Donald Trump is doing next.
How can the federal government assist small business owners like you and I? Because we're, at the end of the day, like bigger corporations, they may be able to absorb some of these costs, but for the small business owner, where our margins are already so small, those tariffs then force us to push up our pricing or shut down. Is there federal policy or something that the government can do to assist small businesses throughout this trade war? Say, even worst case scenario, like what's the federal plan for small businesses?
I mean, as an MP, I would be working to drive work in this region. So there's lots of ways to do that. Let's talk about the film industry again. I keep going back to this because it's something that I know well. And I also believe that there's a huge opportunity for our region to become a destination for the film industry to film in. So what would have to happen? So I don't know if you know anything about the film industry. Do you have any friends in that world?
Oh, for sure.
And you hear about them going to North Bay to film? Like, why does anybody want to go to North Bay? It's because North Bay is offering huge tax cuts for industry to film up there. So if we can do something like that, that will come from the federal government for our region and drive film production in this region, that would be a great way to stimulate the economy. There's jobs, but there's also an influx of people who need places to stay. They need food. They shop when they're not working. That would be a huge benefit to our economy. I would love to see a film crew on Picton Main Street. I would love to rent my space for $10,000 a day for a film crew to film in it.
Me too.
Right?
That'd be great.
This is doable. We can make this happen. Like it's a conversation at a few levels of government, but the federal government has a huge part to play in this. And they're also pushing a bill through called the Online Streaming Act, which is like kind of CanCon energy. It is, it's going to make sure that Canadian content is at the forefront of our streaming services, which is going to mean Netflix is going to be buying a ton of Canadian content. So we have to make it. Why not make it in Bay of Quinte? I don't know if you know this, but Trenton was like the Hollywood of the North.
Yeah, North Hollywood.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like, it's in our blood, man.
Yeah, that's right.
Make it happen here.
Yeah, well, I think on the film side, I think we actually have so many local great creatives and studios. We're friends with quite a few people who are in the industry, and that's kind of our collective dream, is that actually this place becomes a production town, because we have so many great locations, like such beautiful natural resources. And really it's not that far from Toronto, from Ottawa. It is wild to me that North Bay is kind of the place to go. I mean, Bay of Quinte and North Bay are the two fastest growing rural communities in Ontario, right? So it's like it still boggles my mind. Why North Bay? That's like 8 hours north of here.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful, but 8 hours away. Right?
Yeah,
so,
it's because people are paying half of what they pay in Toronto to film. We're talking huge tax cuts and not just Canadian companies, but American companies as well, who already want to film here because our dollar is so much lower than theirs. So yeah, it's something that needs to be pushed for. And I know there's like the Quinte Film Council is working really hard to make this happen, but they need support from the federal government to see it go through.
As far, besides housing, because I mean, obviously that's just one of the many crises that we're in right now. What are some other issues in the Bay of Quinte that are near to your heart that you're really excited to get to Ottawa to work on?
Oh man, healthcare, right? Healthcare is always such a big topic. Healthcare, it is always the first thing that when, you see an interview of a Canadian on the internet or those quick clips, and it's like, what makes Canada great? And they're like, free healthcare. Yeah. And it truly is, like, it is a pillar of our identities of being Canadian. And we're seeing healthcare sort of trickle into privatization, and nobody's paying attention. I was speaking with a gentleman a few months ago, and he's like, wait times were too long, so I hired a private doctor. I was like, oh, this is really, like, the average person is leaning towards private healthcare. And that scares me. Like, it starts to happen as a trickle, and all of a sudden wait times are longer, and we're not getting the investment from the government to make sure that our universal health care stands strong. So that's a conversation close to my heart.
What do you see as the main issues there that are causing those wait times? Is it lack of funding? Is it mismanagement? Is it just simply not enough doctors? Are we not incentivizing them? Where is the roots of our healthcare problem?
Not enough anything. So I went to school to be a paramedic, and one of the reasons why I didn't continue on that road is there's a thing called offload delay, where you bring in your patient and you sit in the corridor of a hospital and wait for them to be sort of checked into the hospital, and you can't leave until they are transferred to hospital care. And as a paramedic, I would sit in a hallway for 8 to 12 hours.
Wow.
Waiting for my patient to see a doctor.
That's wild.
And it's just so incredibly frustrating. And this is a huge problem. Hallway healthcare, like there's a nickname for it because it happens every day. And so we need hospital beds. We need to invest into building more hospital beds. We need to invest in training more doctors. We need more support staff. Just need more money funneled into that system in a big way. In terms of emergency services, this conversation plays into everything. It's like, I don't know if you're familiar with the word homeostasis, like the homeostasis of the human body. It's like when one system isn't working, the whole body doesn't work properly. Right. And the same goes for our society. When one system isn't working, so, our vulnerable populations aren't being taken care of, the whole system gets thrown off. I'm a hockey mom. My son plays for the Bulls, and his teammate got knocked out on the ice during a game this past season. And he knocked out cold, 12 years old, and he laid there for 45 minutes waiting for an ambulance.
Oh my goodness.
That could have been devastating.
Yeah.
Thankfully, he had a concussion and he recovered. But, you know, it just, that's a huge weight.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a huge, you know, gap in our entire system.
Yeah. When the inefficiency begets more inefficiency.
Exactly.
So if you're one patient a shift, basically,
Right?
bringing someone in, that's just how many other people are just being backlogged.
Yeah, exactly. So there's work to do there,
Mm-hmm.
but it's important work. I can't imagine having to, you know, weigh the cost benefit of taking my kid to the hospital, which was, you know, my son got injured in hockey. I don't know. I think he needs to stop playing hockey. Like, so many injuries in hockey. He's heading into body checking next year. And I like every day I'm like, I'm sorry, this is your last year. You're not playing anymore. I can't.
He's not going to be happy if you pull him out the year that he finally gets to check people.
He like laughs at me.
That's a milestone as a Canadian.
Yeah. Just being a mom watching that, they go into the board so fast. But so anyway, he had an injury. He woke me up at 4 a.m. and he was like, I think it was a chest injury and he couldn't sleep because he was in so much pain. And I was like, do you want to go to the ER? And I didn't really want to because it was 4 a.m,
mm-hmm.
but also I'm worried about my kid. And he's like, well, he knows I'm a single mom working to support my family. He's like, how much is it going to cost? I was like, dude, you're not paying for this.
Yeah.
Our government is taking care of us here.
Mm-hmm.
And to see the relief on his little face that he wasn't causing a burden for me was just like, it really drove home, you know, the idea of having to consider that when you're seeking healthcare for your kids, for your family. So,
I mean, I myself am a beneficiary of the healthcare system. I'm a cancer survivor, and I went through KGH. They were wonderful. I kind of developed the saying is Canadian healthcare is wonderful if you're dying.
Yeah.
Outside of that,
it's hard.
I wanted to see an allergist. They told me 36 months to wait,
my God.
which is 3 years, by the way. Just say 3 years.
God.
But it's I think that's comes down to a few factors. I mean, like we have obviously a doctor shortage here. Mm-hmm. We have a nursing shortage. We have all kinds of inefficiencies as well. Especially when you're competing with the states where, you know, someone who goes through and becomes a physician, they can be making literally almost 10 times the amount with 50% of the cost, and their dollar goes further. Say like in Texas, for example, where you can $500,000 home is quite substantial compared to here. Is there an NDP plan to increase our supply of doctors? One of the things I've heard mentioned is actually doing recertification for newcomers to the country so we can have more medical professionals. Is that something the NDP is working towards? For
sure, yeah. The NDP is dedicated to training more doctors, broad spectrum, and it's actually an interesting conversation, that idea of like going to the States and making more money for doctors. You would be surprised at the amount of doctors, United States trained doctors, who come here because they believe in universal health care.
Oh, wow, really?
And they want to be part of that system.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's this sort of idea that doctors are in it for the money, but I have seen what it takes to be a doctor firsthand, and it truly is a passion for these people. Like they just couldn't do anything else. And they're there because they want to serve. Mm-hmm. So, for sure, we're going to lose a few doctors to the States, but we're also going to gain doctors who want to be part of a system, who are truly taking care of their community and their people. So,
one of the other crises that we're in locally here, I mean, Belleville, the city of Belleville, has been under a state of emergency for the past, how long has it been? It's been 4 or 5 months now because of the overdose rate that we have. Yeah. in our town here, I think there was 14 overdoses in a span of 2 hours at one point, which triggered the state of emergency.
Yeah.
What is the NDP's plan on dealing with fentanyl, with these drug overdoses that we're seeing, not just in our community, but across the country writ large?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of two ways to go at this. There's the conservative camp way, which is, giving the police the tools they need to deal with it, which I assume is more money, and then incarcerating people who are maybe causing this issue. Or we could take care of our vulnerable population. We could invest in social services that give people what they need to cope with their addiction. We could offer safe housing for people. We could offer food. We could offer, an opportunity to participate in life in a very different way than what they're used to. So it really is an investment to social programming. And, it's been proven in countries across the world time and time again that investing in social services all solves the problem. Investing in police does not solve any problem. It just puts more people into our jail system. So that's the NDP stance, and it's something I really believe in.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm excited locally because we do have a new a center in Belleville that I believe it's acting as a warming station, but also providing social services, especially for those who are dealing with substances, which is super encouraging and needed. And I think we all have somebody, at least that we know of, either one or two people away from us who are affected by this kind of thing. My wife's cousin, he was on the street and he passed away just 2 years ago, and we didn't even know him, right? And it's so close to home that we're not even aware of it. So I think, again, it's an infrastructure issue again, right? It's like especially in Canadian winters, it's like we need warming stations. We need people to be, and then not just, I think you're right, incarcerating people with substance addiction issues is never the answer. It usually always makes it worse. Yeah. And having those social services available is key. As far as the federal policy goes, this is kind of all tied in with Trump as well, because initially with his conditions on the tariffs was fixing our fentanyl problem at the border. So even though we only apparently 1% of America's fentanyl is coming from Canada, the rest is from Mexico and other places. But then we increased our CBSA agents on the border as well in order to try and appease Trump there. But on the practical side, is that a function? Is that practical is it securing our border to get fentanyl out of the country? Like, there's obviously it's a multi-tiered problem, but is that an area we should be investing in, or is that something that's actually not going to be as effective as we think?
I mean, we've all watched the documentaries of the war on drugs in the United States, and the war is never won by the government. So sure, we have to appease Trump. I think that was just an excuse for him to drop these tariffs. It was like the flavor of the day. It's so unpredictable, and he does what he wants. I don't know if us putting more agents on our border are really going to affect anything. But again, it just dials back to social programming. There's always going to be drugs available if you're looking for them. It's never going to go away. The government's never going to win that war. But what they can do is support vulnerable populations that, end up using drugs because they don't have the support they need. Mm-hmm. So, once again, social programming is key.
On the controversial side of the kind of the drug epidemic that we're having, in BC, they've tried this out with safe injection sites.
Yeah.
That was the province that instituted that. Is that something that the NDP federally is looking into? Is that something that works? Is that something that, are we still experimenting with that, or what's your take on safe injection?
Yeah, I believe it has been proven that it is effective in keeping people safe. Definitely. I guess the concern is if you put these things out in the community, people feel like it's more acceptable to use the drugs. Is
or
that
accessible? Maybe is the
yeah.
is the
So
pushback?
I mean, like like I have a teenager, and she's a really good kid, but she has peers who are. We're not talking about injectable drugs. We're talking about smoking pot. But it's like, sure, you can, you can do everything in your power to make sure these kids don't have an opportunity to smoke pot, but they're going to find it.
Sure.
And it's like anybody using drugs is going to use drugs. Why not let them do it in a safe space?
Yeah.
And then, again, we're talking about the healthcare conversation. If these people are being supported, they're less likely to overdose and, add another constraint on our healthcare system. They're less likely to end up with illness because of unclean needles.
Mm-hmm.
Again, another burden on our healthcare system. So, yeah, I do believe that safe injection sites are an important piece of policy here.
Cannabis is the tougher one. Because, as a cancer survivor, I have used cannabis medicinally and to great benefit for myself.
Yeah.
But it's not this wonder drug that we want to think it is. There's also a negative side to it. There's a downside, and very much pro having legal supply of it, so we know it's safe, because there have been lots of instances here locally of people getting cannabis from certain sources around here that have been laced with fentanyl and other things. So I'm very pro that cannabis, but I think there is an argument where I'm sympathetic to, where there is this accessibility part of it, where it has become more acceptable in a part of our culture as not just accessible, but acceptable socially, that this is now a thing. So I don't know where I land on it yet, because obviously as a cannabis user myself who has benefited from it medicinally, I don't know. It was a big jump that the Liberals went from basically zero to full legalization instead of decriminalization and then rolling it out. But the jury's still out on it for me as far as cannabis, but it's everywhere now, and I'm not a huge fan of that either, to a degree. Like, as far culturally speaking, I'd prefer that over alcohol, because I think alcohol has a lot more of a health risk in our communities than cannabis does. Yeah. But it's how do we protect our kids from even cannabis? Because if they're going to use drugs, it's probably the best one to use. Yeah. But how do we protect our kids from a very real cannabis reliance or addiction? Because it maybe not be chemically addictive, but it definitely is on the psychological side.
Mm-hmm. This is the age-old question faced by every parent of time: how to stop your kid from using substances, cannabis or alcohol or any of the other drugs they can get their hands on. And vaping is a big concern now too. My daughter's friends all vape, and I always see when I go to the school, contests to, if you go 60.
Just big steam clouds coming out of the school.
Oh man, yeah. But it's like, you can win an iPhone if you don't vape for 60 days. And this is directed towards 13, 14-year-olds.
That's wild.
It is really scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, just like education is key. Open dialogue in the home. I live very close to the school, and I'm often feeding several children at my dining table, and we just lay it all out. I'm like, nothing is off the table. Like, we can talk about drugs, we can talk about sex, we can talk about, teachers that they're struggling with, or struggles at home or anything, it's like, let's keep the dialogue open and honest. And, you know, I think when there's not this like taboo around drugs and mystique, there's less desire for teenagers to do it. It's just like, okay, it's a thing and I've learned about it. And, you know, I hope they choose not to. So far, my daughter has chosen not to, and I'm really proud of her for that. And I hope she continues. But if she does do it, I want to know. I want to know where she's doing it. I want to know where she's getting it from. And it's like this weird balance of like, I don't want to encourage her. It's the last thing I want her to do, but I don't want her to hide it from me.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's the trick of parenting, isn't it? Right? It's like, don't do this thing, but be honest with me if you're going to, because I want to make sure. And then, it's I have a 4 and a 6-year-old, so I'm still a few years away from all that. But it's, I mean, I'm thinking about it now. It's like, well, how do I approach a lot of these topics and make sure that I'm not covering it with a layer of shame and guilt where they're too afraid to actually talk about it with me.
Yeah, no, it's super important. And I do think modeling good behavior in the home is really important in that conversation. I mean, I was never interested in smoking when all of my friends smoked, but my parents didn't smoke. So it wasn't a thing I grew up with or that was modeled for me. And you know, I think that's the conversation with every substance. If good behavior around substances are modeled in the home, that's probably the path that hopefully the path your kid will take. But yeah, it's I mean, as you know, as a parent, it's like you can do everything you can do, but you only have so much control and influence.
Yeah, I think part of the mature parent is understanding when and how to release your children to the world, because at the end of the day, you don't have that control over them.
Yeah, it's a really scary thing. Even from day one, I remember the birth of my first child. It was like, oh my God, like my heart is literally walking around outside of my body.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah. It's just, and there's nothing you can do except do the best you can do and just, you know, hope that everything else goes the way you want it to.
I put my son on the bus for the first time this year. He's in JK, and I really struggled with it. And I was like, but he's just so little. And like, how can I put him on the bus?
So little, I know.
He's just a little baby still. And man. But yeah, it's that's the joy of life, right? It's just it cycles through and it keeps moving, and you have to let go of certain things. And
and we see these little people, and like they come into the world with open hearts and open minds, and they truly, like, they want the best for their friends, and they want to live in an environment that's safe and healthy. And it's like, this is what we're working for right now. Like, this is why I'm doing this, because I want my impact on the world to be something that's making a better future for my children. And it's like, we're watching the states go even more and more right wing, and diversity is becoming less of a conversation, and inclusion, and we're seeing students in the States being deported based on their heritage and the countries that they grew up in. And it's just like, this is not the world I want for my kids. And I feel super dedicated to making sure that Canada only moves in a more positive direction. And I don't think it's going to be easy. It's like, because of what's happening in the States and the surge of the right-wing movement and Trump's rhetoric, it's giving an opportunity for people here who have those beliefs to have more of a platform, and it's giving them license to do and say things that never would have been acceptable before. So this is
least of which people welcoming the 51st state rhetoric, which drives me bananas. And I know many people who have been like, well, maybe it's not the worst idea. And I'm like, over my dead body, thank you very much.
It's like, have you actually
no, thank
have you actually thought about this? Like, what that would mean for Canadians? Like, life as you know it isn't gonna look the same.
I kind of laugh at it because it seems very simple in Trump's mind. It seems like to be like, oh, I'll just take the whole country as the 51st state. It's like, are you aware of the class division, racial division, all language division that we have in our country? Right? We don't even have free trade in our own country. So it's like, good luck solving all of our problems, right?
Yeah.
So part of me is just that the darker side of my mind is just like, yeah, take us on. I'd love to see you figure out what we haven't figured out in 150 years, right? Like,
it's like those memes you see of like someone getting kidnapped, and they're like, it's like you get kidnapped, but your ADHD brain just keeps talking and talking and talking, and they like pull over and drop you off like in 4 blocks. It's like maybe same energy for Trump.
They're far more annoying than I could deal with. They're losers. They can have their own country.
Right. I don't understand this hockey, his elbows up.
Half of them are speaking French. I don't understand what they're saying. Like,
this language. What is this language?
That's actually one of the things. I'm just like, Trump's aware that we have Quebec, right? It's like, have fun. I don't think you guys are going to get along. You know?
Totally.
Which neat enough, like the Quebecois separatist movement is actually decreasing in popularity. I think what it's meaning is that we're seeing a bit more unity in our country, which is like, thank God, about time. We need that unity, especially now. And I'm hoping that kind of brings down the polarization of the culture around politics in our country, because we're not the same as the States. I think like the States, they've always been like, well, not always, but especially recently, it's like the left is here and the right is here. And the reality is most people are kind of centrist. They lean this way or they lean that way, but the rhetoric is like this. And in Canada, it was always like our extremes were here. It was never like that, right? Like all of us used to be more centrist, but I'm hoping that the silver lining of this trade war is that we bring some national unity, not just on the political side, but on the social side as well. Post-COVID, post-housing crisis, health crisis, all the crises that have divided us, we can get on board with one another and actually really rebuild our communities in a lot of ways. So.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing, right? It's like nothing builds community like having a common enemy.
Sure.
So, yeah.
It's too bad that it's the United States of America.
It's not great for our economy. But
it's
not ideal.
It's not great. So on the topic of motherhood, how do you plan to balance that? Having a business, single mom, being our member of parliament, how do you mesh all of that high responsibility tasks into a practical, functional program for yourself, I guess? How do you do that?
Yeah, this is the stuff I thrive on, Ryan. It's just, I don't know, like, I've never chosen the easy path. It's not who I am. And when things are a little too calm and quiet, I'm always starting a new project. It's just who I am. And my kids...
You're very type A.
Yeah. I guess you could say that. It's just, there's so much work to be done in this lifetime.
Sure.
And nothing is impossible. Mm-hmm. I truly believe that if you want something bad enough and you believe in it enough, you can make it happen. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it will be a shift in our lifestyle. And that is a conversation I've had with my kids. When I decided to do this, we talked about it, and it's been sort of a constant conversation throughout this process. And I think they're really proud of me for doing this, and they get it. And, you know, I know when you're a kid, it's like your world is mostly about you. But because of the conversations we have at our dining room table all the time, and like we cover a lot of topics, and they see the world in a much broader frame. They know that we're affected and their futures are affected by what's happening worldwide. Like we talk about media bias, we talk about fascism, we talk about what a dictatorship looks like. Like all of these things are not new words for my kids. So it's something that is, you know, we'll just do it.
Yeah.
Because we always have.
Yeah. My wife is very similar. Like she'll be, when things are like less stressful, she's more stressed. But when there's a real crisis, like when I went through cancer, she was just on it. Like, no, she was just doing it. And people are like, are you okay? And she's like, oh yeah. Like she's just meant, she just has this ability in her just to take on. I'm not that way. That's why I could never put my name in the hat.
And I mean,
that's a lot.
This is something that I didn't learn until I was like 37, 38. I'm 39 now, so it's very recent. Capacity is different for different people, because I often get pushback in my work life from people who are like, well, I don't know how you can do all this. Like, you won't have time for this. And why would you commit to that? You don't have time. You have 4 kids. And it's like, oh, you don't do life like I do it. Like your capacity, you want to chill. And that's totally fair. I have zero chill. You
don't have the luxury of that.
Right?
4 kids and a business.
I don't want it. Yeah, it's just not who I am. So, yeah, that was it finally, you know, when I realized that people have different capacity, I was able to give people more grace and give myself more grace, because like we're all different.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just.
Well, I think the combination of entrepreneurship and parenthood, it stretches you in so many ways that you didn't even think you were capable of when you started, right? Like, I'm sure you remember your first negative client interaction.
Oh yeah.
And it's, at the time, it's just soul. Yeah. You're like, why am I doing this? Am I worth anything? And you question all that. But then you grow and you develop into that. And then now it's like, oh yeah, no, I know how to solve that. It's not reflected on myself as a person and an individual, but there's a problem. I know how to solve it. And kids too. It's you're kind of forced into that as well. 'Cause you know, if you don't perform, well, they starve, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, there's no option. You have to grow. You have to be better.
Yeah. And it's a muscle you build, right? Just like everything else. It's, you do the thing, you do the hard thing, and then it's not so hard, and then you're ready to do the next one. Yeah. And you realize you have more capacity.
Yeah. Well, I like that you said that you do hard things. One of the most impactful books that I read as a young person. I'm still fairly young, but when I was 18.
So you're not 39.
Yeah, that's right. Well, close enough. When I was 18, I read a book. It was literally called "Do Hard Things."
Yeah.
And went through kind of the what's going on in your brain when you are doing hard things and when you challenge yourself. And when you put the expectation up here, you're more likely to rise to it. But if you put the expectation down low, you're going to sink to it.
Yeah.
So that really resonates with me. I'm glad you said that. One last thing before we cut off the interview. There's so much voter apathy.
Oh my God.
Like the provincial general was better than the by-election that we had.
Yeah.
We went from like 38%, I think, to 42%. What would you say to people who are, one, undecided on who to vote for? Because people like myself who are disenfranchised with the parties, we don't want to be this partisan thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to be just part of the group, part of the club, part of the cult, whatever it is. I want to have more effect in my local community. Yeah. What do you say to those people? And what do you say to the people who are like, screw this, I just don't want to be involved. All of these people are corrupt. They're dishonest. I just don't want to be part of the system.
I hear that a lot, more often than I thought I would. Mm-hmm. And guys, like, you get to choose. You get to choose. You are an active member of this society. You get to choose who represents you, and you need to act on that. You know, there's a reason why women fought so hard to have the vote, because they wanted a voice. There's a reason why, you know, marginalized communities fought so hard to make that happen, because they want a voice. You get to choose. So, you know, I keep getting questions about voter splitting, and, you know, the left should unite just to take the seat away from the conservative. And it's kind of like, okay, so yeah, I think most people of this region, from what I understand, don't want to see Pierre Poilievre in government. He's not a guy that represents Canada. But I think what they're missing is that, Mark Carney spent his entire career making money for billionaires. The Liberal government has moved from being somewhat left to very centrist. And you don't get the Canada that we have today without the left being involved. So that left is the NDP. And on a sort of riding level, you get to choose for the candidate who you think is going to do the work for you in Parliament Hill. So it's so important that you tune in to the conversations and get to know your candidate and put your vote behind somebody that you really believe in, somebody that you feel like you can connect with and have access to. To me, a good member of Parliament is somebody, when they're not sitting in Parliament Hill, is sitting in their office in the community with the door open every single day, who is responding to emails and phone calls, who's having those conversations with the community, who's asking the question, like, what do you need? What do you need to make your life better from the federal government? And how can I support you? I see things that need to be addressed, but I also want to have those conversations. Like, if I visited Gleaner's Food Bank yesterday, and I asked Jody, I was like, if I could wave a magic wand and grant you one thing from the federal government, like, what would that thing be? And it took him a minute to come up with the thing, because we don't feel like we have the opportunity to ask for those things, and it's kind of like, no, this is what I'm here for, because I want to get you what you need. That's why you're voting for me.
Mm-hmm. And food insecurity, wild enough, is one of the biggest issues in our communities to this day, which is wild, because growing up, we never considered that. Like, we grew up in that very middle class thing,
Yeah.
and there's breakfast clubs that we're starting and everything, but where we're at now, food insecurity is such a real issue, and Gleaners is wonderful. They do
amazing,
such key work in our town.
And now, do you know about the biodome that they built? So they're actually growing food on the property.
Yeah.
So cool, man.
Yeah.
So cool. Yeah. It's like I keep having these conversations and visiting these organizations, and I'm so inspired by what they're doing, and B, like, I want to like dig my teeth into this and like support them and
more of this,
right?
More of this,
like see these brilliant ideas expanded on and supported, and I don't think an MP gets to just get voted in and then put their feet up. Like they need to be working their butts off for the community. Like, that's what they're there for. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's probably a great place to stop, Kate. Thanks again for coming on. Maybe you can just plug yourself, tell you where people can find you. And speaking of open communication, if people have questions for you, they want to get in touch, where do they find you?
Yeah. Okay. So our campaign office is opening in Picton on Main Street, 181 Main Street. We're having a meet and greet on Sunday from 2 to 4. So I would love for anybody to drop by, but also there will be somebody there for the whole month of April. And we really want to connect with the community. So we'd love it for people to drop in and say hello. You can find me on socials at Kate Crothers NDP, or my personal social is at Kate Crothers Design. Find us on Facebook through the Bay of Quinte NDP page. Just Google it. And website, email, Kate Crothers at ndp.ca. So.
And you reply back to direct messages.
I do.
I found that out. Thank you so much for replying.
I work really hard to respond to everybody. It's like, if someone is taking time out of the day to connect with me, that feels like a real privilege. So some of them get lost in the request folder, like they get hidden for some reason. But yeah, I try really hard to get back to everybody.
Perfect. All right. For everyone listening, the federal general election is on April 28th. Make sure that you're registered. If you've moved, go to, I believe it's elections.ca to put in your new address so you can get a voting card. Make sure you vote. Pay attention to the conversations that were happening. Tune in to the Take a Look podcast. We're hopefully going to have all the candidates locally here on the Bay of Quinte on the show so we can get to know them, understand the policy, and you can determine who is the best representative for the Bay of Quinte. So thanks again, Kate, for coming on.
Thanks
and
for having me.
Best of luck over this next month. Short election, but good luck and hats off to you for putting in the work. It's not an easy thing.
Thanks, Ryan.